Well, all summer long, we have been showcasing the history of local towns here in the Valley.
And this week I went to a town famous for its caverns, but there's much more there than you think.
The town name never changes, even though that was very common throughout Page and throughout the country.
How the name Luray came about remains a mystery, but it's always been the name of the Page County town.
There was a land grant in 1756, again the Groveton tract south of Luray.
Dan Vaughn is an 8th generation Luray resident.
My parents lived there, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-parents. I could point to their houses right there.
His family has lived in the Page County settlement since before it became a town in August of 1812.
211 across the two mountain gaps, and present-day 340 was used to traverse the valley.
The Civil War happening only steps away from the town.
The records were taken out of the courthouse and stored in a cave.
But not leaving lasting damage.
Interestingly enough, they weren't bothered at the courthouse, but they did receive some damage being stored in the cave there.
When you think of Luray, you might think of the caverns.
Benton Stebbins, who was a photographer, and he took on some locals here. They went searching out.
The discovery of the underground cavern in 1878 spurred the railroad to completion.
Excursionists came by the thousands to see the new wonder of the world.
It opened up the area for commerce and new industry.
Without the rail, the mining extracts were not going to be dealt with commercially in a profitable way.
But the panic of 1893 brought disaster.
It was the mining of gold and silver, and it was again building too much, too fast, no regulation, and just a lot of money was extended that really couldn't be made up for. There were properties along the rail that were burned intentionally. Our own Luray Inn here, a very elaborate.
Old landmarks still stand today, such as the Luray Singing Tower from 1937.
It was built as a memorial to T.C. Northcott's wife.
In present day, the Luray Caverns see 500,000 visitors annually. Agro-tourism, outdoor activities, and even a thriving art scene can also be found in the town. The Chamber of Commerce and the Railroad Museum, located in the refurbished depot.
That's a good story, I thought.
Beverly Garber has lots of good stories.
December 11th, 1868, the first train came through Timberville, Broadway, and went on to Harrisonburg. Okay, this is the old post office building. It was built in 1912 by Charlie Forney. And right here is me.
He's been instrumental in opening the Plains District Memorial Museum, showcasing history of the area.
It was known as Williamsport. Then in 1833, it was known as Thompson's Store. And then in 1850, it was Riddle's Tavern.
The oldest building,
you can see how they were notched out, I guess, with an axe.
Dates back to the 1750s. John Ziegler purchased the home in 1816.
One of the main guys that helped establish Timberville, really.
He also built a barn.
And that's where the first worship services in Timberville were held.
At risk during the Civil War.
They were the old Dunkards. Didn't believe in war. They wouldn't take sides or anything. Yankees lit the brush pile in the garden, and they just rode off. And that's how the barn survived.
The Civil War wasn't the only conflict with an effect on the area.
See one of the guardhouses pretty well, and there's another one back there.
During World War II, 600 people were held.
They worked at the poultry plant and up at Ziegler's Cannery.
In a German prisoner of war camp.
And the farmers would come and take a crew of them out and work on the farms and so forth. Then they worked in the orchards and so forth. And all the old people used to tell me it was a German prisoner just to be singing up a storm.
Those weren't the only visitors.
You could say at that time he was the most famous person in the world.
Charles Lindbergh came through town.
You know how little towns are. You're supposed to keep a secret. Well, that didn't work. There was about 500 people down there that day. I'd taken these myself of Charles A. Lindbergh, November 18th, 1927. It was W.C. Hoover Field, and she signed her name Rebecca. That was my Aunt Becky.
At the museum, you can see more photos of Lindbergh's visit as well as other parts of the town's history. In Timberville, Monica Casey, WHSV. Long before it was chartered in 1835.
Settled by Scotch-Irish in the 1700s, and then a lot of people came from Germany.
Or even got its name.
And so it became known as McGill's Ford.
It's been known as Bridgeport, Dinkletown, and now Bridgewater.
Those 7 bridges, various things have happened to them over the years. Some of them washed away in floods. One of them was burned during the Civil War.
Skirmishes which took place on the south side of the river.
The troops did come through, and they did take the cattle and they did take the hay or they took the corn.
One of the most famous structures, the covered bridge dating back to 1878. The current one was built in 1955.
Everybody went down to the bridge and jumped off. I mean, that was what they did in the summertime. That was a big deal, you know, was being able to be old enough to jump off the bridge.
Into the water, helping commerce flow in the community.
And one of the reasons I guess it was a commercial area was because of the river and because there were a number of mills on the river.
That same water responsible for 6 major floods that hit the town, including the deadly flood of 1949.
We sat on the roof that night as the water went through. And of course, 3 people drowned. One of them was a classmate of mine and her mother. And it's what everybody remembers.
The railroad went through the town for a short time.
So you used to be able to catch the train here and go into Stanton, and then when you went to Stanton, then you could go just about anywhere on the railroad.
The old depot is now in Oakdale Park. Many parts of Bridgewater's history have been repurposed. The old Barbie Inn is now the Cracked Pillar Pub. The Sipe store might become a town movie theater. And the white oak tree that predates the town has a new sapling planted at Generations Park, continuing a growing tradition and keeping history alive. In Bridgewater, Monica Casey, WHSV.
In 1837, 2 brothers, Daniel and Henry Foriel, purchased 1,100 acres of land and built the Shenandoah Ironworks.
The area was known as the Forge in 1840. Local historian Irving Judd says it was known as the Pittsburgh of the Valley. The iron produced there was used for Confederate cannonballs in the Civil War.
Shenandoah Industrials forged iron into solid bars, which were shipped to the cannon factory in Richmond.
After the Civil War,
And this picture here is Mr. William Melanie.
who opened the Big Gem Furnace in 1882. The furnace provided jobs soon after and sparks that illuminated the town.
When a kettle of red-hot cinders was poured down the cinder bank, many times the town streets were made more serviceable and improved by spreading over these layers of cinders.
Milne also brought in the Shenandoah Valley Railroad.
Their main supply of income, so to speak, with bringing some tourists in, bringing livestock in.
The town took his name in 1884, and by 1890 it grew into Shenandoah City. The population peaked in 1930.
Companies started coming in, like the knitting mill, the Casey Jones overhaul factory.
In 1958, the Norfolk and Western Railroad closed the roundhouse.
It's still in operation, but not like it used to be.
Now Russell Comer hopes to open a railroad museum.
Pertaining to Norfolk and Western Railway as it was 100 years ago.
The town currently has half of the funding needed.
We think that it's a good fit for our town and it will help economically.
In Shenandoah, Monica Casey, WHSV.
The Shenandoah Valley was actually occupied by the American Indians, and the first permanent white settler in this part of the Shenandoah Valley was Adam Miller. He was given a land grant.
Fertile farmland kept settlers in the area.
But the South Fork of the Shenandoah River is one of only a few rivers that flows from south to north.
Allowing for shipping and trading.
About 1810, there was a store built by George Conrad, and it became a post office in 1816.
A famous Confederate general planned the Shenandoah Valley Campaign from the settlement.
The Miller Kite Museum was used by Stonewall Jackson for 10 days as his headquarters.
And the Civil War came full circle when the Shenandoah Valley Campaign ended.
The federal troops were chased all the way back to Conrad's store or Elkton.
The name of the town changed thanks to the railroad.
And there's a creek that runs through present-day Elkton called Elk Run. So the Shenandoah Valley Railroad opted to use the name Elkton.
A boom in the 1890s helped the town flourish.
There was a group formed called the Elkton Improvement Company, and they advertised they were giving away free land to anyone that wanted to locate here.
And the population hovered around 2,000 in the 1940s.
Elkton annexed some additional land outside of the original limits, and that actually doubled the population.
Today, the Miller Kite House is a museum that attracts more than just history buffs to the valley. Some say a spiritual presence lurks around the property.
And some of the workers experienced voices. They experienced noises like a person walking upstairs that wasn't here.
Paranormal investigators have visited with their equipment.
Sometimes a light will come on. Sometimes one machine actually will decipher a person's voice.
But the ghosts seem friendly, mirroring the welcoming residents of the town.
Sort of like a reunion every day, you know, when you just know everybody. That's the way it's always been.
A home to anyone. In Elkton, Monica Casey, WHSV.
Name of Daniel Gray. He fought the Revolutionary War and he was our first postmaster.
In Gray's time, the town was called Mount Pleasant, but Mount doesn't mean mountain.
Towns where you could actually get a fresh horse. And in 1826, that is when it was named in honor of Andrew Jackson.
Before he was president.
Jackson traveled through Virginia on his way to Tennessee, loved the valley.
The Union Church dates back to 1825. It brought other denominations to the valley and served as a Civil War hospital.
Inside today, it's been preserved, but there are writings where folks who were, soldiers who were there being taken care of would write their name and the date they were there.
The Mims Bottom Covered Bridge is one of the longest running covered bridges in the state. It was first constructed in 1867.
It had been destroyed by fire, arson. We have big trucks that sometimes the drivers don't pay attention to the signs and try to put a 53-foot box trailer through the covered bridge, which does not fare well for the bridge.
Mount Jackson has depended on the roads around it.
Route 11, of course, was a buffalo path that ran through the area.
The interstate has been a blessing.
81's been great to put some people here at our doorstep again.
And a curse.
Where Route 11 brought them right through downtown.
The town boomed in the 1950s.
We had the largest movie theater in the county. The movie theater that's being restored right now.
It actually sat 716 with 180 in the balcony alone.
John Bohr opened the Curtain Hall Coffee House Cafe next door and is renovating Nelson Theater back to its 1940s theme, letting history play on.
There's a lot of good people in this community of Mount Jackson alone who have put forth effort to try to restore buildings, and it's coming alive again.
In Mount Jackson, Monica Casey, WHSV.